This is a Sports Radio Live podcast covering your world of sports. Bryan Houston's Sports Radio Live. It's weekdays at 3 on 99.3 Talk FM, the talk of East Texas.
Tim Brando, how you doing, Tim?
Bryan, I'm good. I'm having a little daddy-daughter day. My youngest from college is in town, and we're at the Sideport in Shreveport watching some IMAX movies. Just having a whale of a time. How about that?
Good. I think you're a good family man. That's good. Your priorities are in the right place. I like that.
Yeah, and she'll drive my golf cart in the afternoon scramble at Southern Trace. So she's a good girl. She'll be my caddy later at 6 o'clock tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, and keeps opening the beer for you. I understand. That's good. You've got her trained well. That's good.
That's right.
Okay. I got to ask you, because I know you've been talking about on your show every day on 99.3 Talk FM. How can one game like the Big 12 and the SEC partnership here that's going to create this game between champions that don't get into the BCS, how can this one game create such an earthquake in college football?
Because it's really not about the game. It's about the association. It's about the alliance. It's about the accord that's been struck between these two leagues, which a year ago at this time seemed to be huge rivals, with Texas A&M and Missouri heading out and going to the SEC. I mean, they appear to be, on the surface, strange bedfellows. What this really does is tell you what can happen, Bryan, when the almighty dollar reigns supreme, and that's what's happening here. The alliance between the Big 12 and the SEC to even stage a game of this magnitude and for it to become a reality this quickly, and without anyone having prior knowledge of it, as we're in the midst of trying to determine at these gatherings between conferences, Myrtle Beach, Amelia Island, Destin next week for the SEC, for all this to be coming down as this is going on, really tells you how quickly the behind-the-scenes covert activities are taking place, so that the power brokers have all of the power that they feel they need to have to swing votes in the direction they need, so that they can get what they want in the top four versus conference champions debate that's taking place between the Big Ten and the Pac-12 on one side, and the SEC and the Big 12 now on the other. When the ACC decided to have its presidents and athletic directors vote to align themselves with the Big Ten with regard to having conference champions part of the equation, that was not what was anticipated, I think, by a lot of people, because John Swofford, the AD of the ACC, has been in lockstep with Mike Slive in terms of the SEC commissioner, with a lot of the thought processes that we should have about the future of the game. And even though Swofford feels that the top four teams should go, it's understandable that he couldn't get the presidents and the ADs from the ACC to agree with him, because they've not been very successful. 2-13 during the BCS era. So, yeah, they know where they are on the food chain, these presidents and ADs, and they were going to go against their commissioner. So I think it was very important for the SEC to get a stronghold back with the Big 12, and vice versa, really, so that they can say, they being Bob Bowlesby, the new commissioner of the Big 12, and Mike Slive, the commissioner of the SEC, they can say when they're sitting across the table from Scott and Delaney on June the 20th, okay, you guys keep talking about your holier-than-thou Rose Bowl and how much you need to protect it. Well, guess what? We've got something just as big or bigger to protect. And the truth is the SEC and the Big 12 have been a lot more successful in the BCS era than either the Pac-12 or the Big 10. 12 of the 14 BCS years, Big 12 or SEC teams have participated, and in 10 of those 14 years, they've won national championships.
Now, the question, though, is because the Big 12 was literally on life support a few months ago, and you're wondering if it was just going to implode, and suddenly now it is a power broker, I guess just because they married the rich doctor in the SEC. Is that how this works?
Well, that's part of it. I think you also really, lion's share of credit here, Bryan, needs to go to Chuck Ninus, who was brought in as an interim commissioner after Dan Beebe was run out on a rail when he fell in disfavor with the folks in Oklahoma, and he lost a lot of his power base because Oklahoma is the other school that swings a big stick in that league, other than DeLoss Dodds in Texas. And frankly, I think for the lion's share of the time he had been there, he had been a puppet for Dodds. That obviously was not the case with Ninus. Chuck Ninus is the past president of the College Football Association. Chuck Ninus has had a consulting firm that helped place athletic directors, presidents, and coaches into jobs. Chuck's got a lot of contacts and a lot of power, and has really since the '84 lawsuit brought by the universities of Georgia and Oklahoma came about. And you saw the separation between the NCAA and college football in terms of control. When that happened and the CFA was formed, Ninus was a ringleader. And I think he was able to push a lot of buttons and pull a number of strings to get the Big 12 back up on its feet. He's been, for years, negotiating contracts with television networks, so all the people in TV know Chuck. I think the restructuring of the Big 12 television deal that he had a lot to do with. Plus, I think it was he and Slive, certainly not Bob Bowlesby. He doesn't even take his position until next month. It was Ninus and Slive that went to work on this alliance and this announcement we had this past Friday. So I really credit Ninus a great deal. And there was a time when I thought that the Big 12 and Texas and OU were going to make sure that they stayed at 10 teams and 10 teams only. I'm not so sure now. I think this really does send a message that between now and the new television contract is negotiated for 2014, roughly a year from now, we could be looking at expansion even in greater numbers, closer to, if not to the 16 super conference concept that's been bandied about for quite some time.
Yeah, well, Dodd said he wanted to stay at 10 teams, and then he said that they did court Notre Dame. Today we hear the TCU athletic director saying at a breakfast this morning that the University of Miami was actually doing some reconnaissance to try to get into the Big 12. We've already heard about Florida State, possibly Clemson. So which of these teams realistically moves in?
Derek Brooks pretty much spilled the beans on that. He outed Florida State on my show last week, as you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's been going on. What you can, Tom Penders had a great line on my show today. If DeLoss Dodds says they want to stay at 10, that means that it's pretty much guaranteed they'll be at 12 within the next 6 months.
I love it.
These guys are going to say what they feel is necessary to be said, but they understand the shelf life of any of their quotes are no more than about a 3 to 5 day period. They just want to send out certain messages publicly while they're all operating in sharp contrast to that behind the scenes. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Tim, what makes Notre Dame such a powerful, attractive target now? We're not talking about 60s, 50s, 80s, whatever. We're talking about 2012. Notre Dame hasn't done anything in years. Why are they so attractive and powerful now?
Well, that's a question I ask quite often. I don't know if I were the conference offices of any of these power leagues, any of the four big ones that we're talking about, obviously the Big 10, SEC, Big 12, and I don't know why they do, other than just the one thing, and that is households, tradition, alumni base, and in some measure, because all of the other schools that have that kind of power base structure are in conferences, they become the main girl in town and continue to be so. Your footprint, not necessarily geographically, but nationally, just seems to grow because of the franchise that has been Notre Dame. You have to remember something. In our part of the world where in the Southwest and Southeast, where college football in and of itself is always going to be strong. In other parts of the country, along the eastern seaboard, certainly in the major cities in the Northeast, college football really doesn't grab the attention of that many people until you put Notre Dame in the mix. Notre Dame still gets a high rating in New York. Notre Dame still has a strong alumni base in that part of the world. And it really is about, just as the case was with the SEC bringing in Missouri and Texas A&M, it's about the footprint, the households, the marketplaces that you can bring in. And Notre Dame brings those in regardless of their record, regardless of how relevant or irrelevant they've been since 1993. They still bring that. They still have that cachet. So that's really all there is to it. Although I believe, and I've said this to all the commissioners that I've come in contact with, if you want to control what's taking place and make sure that everybody's on equal footing, you should. This is as vulnerable as Notre Dame has been. For the record, that as you mentioned, they've just not been as good because of things that they've done to themselves, be it their academic requirements or whatever. Mm-hmm. What should be done is that their hands should be forced. They should be forced to join a league, make your decision. You're either going to come to the Big 12, and or the ACC needs to lobby and get them. And I really believe Notre Dame has been targeting the ACC behind closed doors a lot more than any other league. And right now, John Swofford, the commissioner of the ACC, really needs them because that Band-Aid that he's got over Clemson and Florida State, trying to keep them in tow, he could turn it into a gauze bandage very quickly and begin healing the wound if he could bring in Notre Dame. Otherwise, the Big 12 has a chance to cut off the ACC at its knees.
Why would Notre Dame want to go to the ACC?
Well, because, as I said before, the Eastern Seaboard is geographically means more to their people. Their alumni base is strong there. I think in the sports outside of football, which, of course, let's face it, football is what matters most to the Subway alumni and even to their legitimate, strong blue bloods. But when you look at the other sports, and particularly college basketball, Notre Dame just doesn't work in the Big 12. They work very well in the ACC. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Atlantic Coast Conference would make sense for them. Also, the ACC could go to them and actually play ball in terms of negotiating concessions with their current television agreement with NBC. Meaning, okay, you can join our league, but we're going to make you be a part of our conference, but we'll allow you to keep your NBC contract while it currently exists. I don't think that could happen in the Big 12 at all. I don't think anyone in the Big 12 would stand for it, but I do think the ACC would make those concessions so that Notre Dame could have its cake and eat it too, so to speak, but they would have to compete in the ACC in football.
Well, let me just throw this out, though. Why wouldn't the Big 12 let them do that when they already let Texas have the Longhorn Network?
Well, hey, that's different. We're talking. Hey, man, there may be Notre Dame may have cachet, but they ain't no Texas, Bryan. You know
Got
that.
it. Totally understand.
Yeah.
Timmy B, I know you want to spend some time with your daughter. We appreciate you coming on with us for just a few minutes. Thanks very much for doing this. We really appreciate it.
You got it, Bryan. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Tim Brando, you can hear him every day, 9 to noon on 99.3 Talk FM.
This is a Sports Radio Live podcast covering your world of sports. Bryan Houston's Sports Radio Live. It's weekdays at 3 on 99.3 Talk FM, the talk of East Texas.